Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you for joining Ideal Hire's webinar, Ending the Vacancy Spiral, How Healthcare Facilities Can Fill Critical Roles Faster. My name is Rachel Southworth. I'm the division leader for Ideal Hire's healthcare travel team, and I will be your moderator this morning. I've been in healthcare staffing since 2011, starting as a recruiter admin, progressing into recruitment, and then leadership in both recruitment and account management, eventually joining Ideal to lead the travel team. We have three incredible panelists joining us today to provide us insights on staffing challenges and key metrics, the ripple effect on outcomes and core staff, strategies and best practices, and how supplemental staffing can add value. Starting with Jenny Melton. She's the program manager for UTMB Correctional Managed Care. She's an HR professional with over 25 years of experience, including 20 years in healthcare staffing. She began on the agency side in travel nurse staffing before specializing in correctional medicine. And since 2017, she's managed vendor partnerships, HR coordination, and workforce strategy for UT Correctional Managed Care, driving efficient, high-quality staffing solutions.
Morning.
Our second panelist is Scott Snyder, Talent Acquisition Leader for American Vascular Associates. Scott builds high-performing clinical outpatient teams with a people-first approach. Skilled in sourcing, screening, and onboarding, he drives efficiency, compliance, and a positive candidate experience. With leadership experience from rookies to executives, Scott uses data-driven strategies to produce productivity and organizational growth. And last but not least, Eric Benson, Senior Vice President of Sales and Marketing for Revel Communities. Eric is a seasoned senior living executive with 15 years in sales, marketing, and operations. As Senior Vice President, he leads growth strategies, empowers teams, elevates resident experiences. He's held senior roles with Anthology Senior Living, The Waters, and Live-In, driving results through high-performing teams and innovative leadership. Thank you all for joining us. I am so excited to have you here. Looking at some of the real-world staffing challenges and metrics, I want to go into a few just kind of high-level stats that we are seeing. So a couple of alarming numbers, or a few alarming numbers that we see. RN shortages projected in 2025. We're looking at anywhere from 78 to nearly 300,000 positions nationally, with some sources projecting a deficit of up to 500,000 open needs by 2030. These shortages have increased to workloads, high burnout rates, and delays in patient care. At the broader healthcare sector, looking at nursing, allied, and therapy, shortages are affecting hospitals, clinics, and long-term care facilities, causing many shifts to go unfulfilled. Some sources stating up to 25% of those positions remaining unfilled. And up to 72% of physical therapy providers are reporting local shortages as well. When we are thinking about these large numbers and pertaining to our wonderful panelists, what are some of the real world staffing challenges that you face within your business? Eric, I'll start with you.
I think that advertisements have changed over the years. It used to be when we'd have an open position, we'd put an ad in the paper, and now most of it is online. And the one thing that we've seen is our participation rates in interviews drop dramatically. So, for example, at one point over the last 5 years, we were down to a 15% attendance rate for our interviews. So people that we would schedule interviews for, that we got either an email verification or a person-to-person phone verification, only 15% of those people were showing up. And that was after you take your initial tranche of, let's say it's 100 resumes, maybe you want 50 of them. And then you look at that small participation rate that actually shows up. So we were needing to cast either a wider net to get more applicants, change our online strategy to get better applicants, or we did some different things to help increase that participation rate, but we had to really look at it almost kind of like a sales funnel and getting them in. And then once they came in, how do you retain them too? So, I mean, it really became this high target numbers game for us.
Yeah, I was going to say that can be very stressful, especially with all the work that your team will put in to get those interviews coordinated.
especially we have corporate support on the recruiting side, but those are typically for our department head positions. So the ones that we had this big high turn on, so the CNAs, the RNs, housekeepers, those are additional daily tasks for our business director, our executive director that they'd fit in between the normal billing, the normal just regulatory compliance that they do. So it's been a challenge.
Yeah, most certainly. Jenny, how has this impacted you within the correctional space?
Yeah, so on the corrections side and dealing with the agency vendors, we kind of see the same thing where it's a low turnout rate. We have a lot of people that will apply for the agency positions for a correctional job, but because there is process that has to happen, clearance, the background checks takes time. We see that 25% of the people that apply for a correctional managed care position through an agency start. So there's 75% that they're interviewing, they're doing the paperwork, we're sending it in for them to process the clearance forms, which is time and money on, the business side. And then with only a 25% that start, that obviously directly impacts us, because every minute or every clearance that we process that is not a start is a clearance that is delayed that could be a start, if that makes any sense. So that impacts us a lot. And then just those that do get through the process, we see are not as committed to the position as we need in regards to accountability. Our tardiness rate is very high, just because there's a lot of moving parts, different areas they have to get through to get to medical. And we see that definitely impacts us on the other side.
Certainly. So you see maybe a high volume of applicants, and then where you get challenged is maybe that commitment or just being able to clear the background checks or whatnot along the way.
Yes.
Yeah, most certainly. And then over to Scott. You are in a slightly different sector than both Jenny and Eric, so would love to hear your perspective on what you do.
Well, so we have vascular centers around the country, and so the folks that we're hiring are non-clinical administrator types through MAs all the way up. You have shown the stat on the RNs. In all of our centers, we have at least one RN, an APRN, or a PA. So the shortage impacts us greatly. It has made the search times longer, tougher. What that means for our physicians is that scheduling patients at the same rate that they would with a full house, they can't do that. So unfortunately, the end result is the patient suffers. If you have vascular disease and we put you off another week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that can be detrimental. That's not ideal for you. And then some of the shortages that we haven't talked about yet are on the physician side. I mean, you need vascular surgeons. That's who performs these procedures in our centers, and interventional radiologists. I think this morning I went on mdjobs.com, just punched up Florida. You can see there's over 300 open positions for a vascular surgeon. The shortages continue to climb. I mean, we're going to have, by the end of this year, 59% of the positions that were opened January 1st will remain open. So we've got search times in our industry over a year.
And that definitely can impact patient care. So perfect segue. I mean, we talk about the numbers, we talk about financial impact, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is the people, right? So and specifically patient care. So can we talk a little bit more about the ripple effect that staffing shortages have had on your teams and how they've impacted patient care? Scott, I know you started to touch on it, but if you can expand a little bit more.
Yeah, certainly. So as far as patient care goes, pushing out a patient, depending on their disease state or comorbidities, like I said, can have all kinds of effects. I'm not clinical. I'm not going to pretend to give you the kind of clinical statistics that you would get from a physician. But it impacts in two ways. We have patients that have lower leg extremities, and that can make them less ambulatory. That means they've got to find rides, they've got to take the time out. So there's a lot of things that have to happen for them to get in. If we are canceling them from week to week, some of these patients are just going to not be seen on time and may perhaps just sort of fall away. Others are going to go other places, and some are going to go into hospitals, which has its own. That would be for another panel interview that we could talk about. But that can be tough on the patients financially, be tough on the families, and it is detrimental to patients' health. So it has a direct effect, I think, in our specialty.
Oh, yeah, most certainly. Jenny, within the correctional space, how does that impact your teams and quality of care issues?
Sure. So all of our patients are residents. So much like the patient population that Eric takes care of, they're residents of our facilities. So the care that they're going to receive is 100% dependent upon our staffing, either on our staff side or through supplemental staffing agency usage. So we have all levels of care within inside of our facilities. So from the walkie-talkies to the complete bedridden full care aspects of it. So when we have a shortage or a low supply of agency staff that's coming through our doors, we have to either put the workload back on our staff to have them do so. It's extra overtime, it's longer shifts, and already a stressful environment because of corrections is more stressful. So that we have those. And then we just have to where we have the political aspect of it being a state government agency is that if we have to shut down care at a facility to divert the staff to another unit that maybe has a higher level of acuity level, that directly impacts all of our operations from nursing care to administration to pharmacy, all of those is impacted. And so not having that steady flow of candidates that are going through the whole process definitely impacts our operations.
Certainly. Eric, moving to you, I know you've talked about some patient experience challenges that you've had with how staffing shortages have impacted you. Can you touch a little bit more on that from our previous conversations?
Yeah, one thing that's actually kind of interesting is when a building is having staffing challenges, obviously overtime goes up. But when a building's about to hit critical staffing challenges, I actually see overtime go down. And what you really just see is the staff just burns out and walks away. They step back. And so when I'm really panicking about where a building's at, it's when I actually see that overtime number start to crater because I'm seeing the staff completely disengaged. Now, a disengaged staff is going to be bad for resident care, bad for outcomes in general. What I would say when a building starts getting kind of back on the right track, so maybe my agency spend is up because I found some kind of long-term band-aids to supplement my staffing while I'm doing some recruitment, I'll actually see the overtime number go up for a period of time. So I'm looking at like a 2-3 week period where both numbers spike, but I'm also seeing a more engaged staff, which is a good thing. But to your original point with it, if the staff are too burnt out to pick up a shift, if they have given up in the building leadership to hit that base level of staffing where at that point they're looking for another job themselves, the care that we're going to be delivering to the residents is going to be substandard, which could lead to regulatory issues, like Jenny said. But also in this litigious world that we live in now, any incidents in the building could lead to major legal issues as well. Now, the other thing I'll say with that is if you get a regulatory issue, you get a legal issue, on my side that I look at too, I'm going to deal with a capital issue too, because my investors are going to say the state just walked in, dropped you with an F tag, put you on stop placement, or even just, any sort of regulatory thing that you've got to report up to them. They're looking at the aggregate of all their different partners that they work with, and that erosion of trust based on bad care outcomes can really have a long-term impact on, I guess, the overall finances of the organization, not just the building.
No, thank you for sharing. And that impacts everybody because if the organization isn't running, then nobody's employed.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot, and I would just say probably to the original question, it goes down to trust. Like you can erode your trust with a bad weekend of care for the individual patients. If you have a bad, week or two of care, you can lose it for lots of families. And a bad month, a bad regulatory visit can erode trust with your capital partners.
Yeah, definitely. In addition to our patients, the other very important group of people is the core staff. So when we talk about critical staffing shortages or maintaining staff retention, how has your core staff been impacted by current staffing challenges? This could be things like workload and burnout. We touched on this high turnover, team morale, and recruitment challenges. But just to open the floor with the three of you, I'll start with Jenny. How has this impacted your core staff? Because I know you have a lot of employees working within UTMB.
Yeah, so I mean, anytime we have core staff with a high number of agency staff, you always fight that battle of they're getting paid more than me because they don't necessarily understand how all that works, right? They may come across an invoice and see what the agency is billing per hour for a said nurse, but they don't necessarily understand what piece of that pie the agency nurse is receiving. So we have that. We have, sometimes the internal fight between the staff nurse trying to show dominance over an agency nurse, which never ends well for either side, never ends well. That's typically when I have to get involved. Then we see, especially for our workforce, because on the state side, they are taken care of as far as benefits and what the perks are of the job. But we also see now the higher that our agency usage is getting to cover FMLAs or just shortages in general, we also are starting to see a lot of our workforce start to retire. And maybe that is because they feel like on the agency side, we have the numbers to cover the vacancies that we have, or maybe they're just maybe tired and competing what they think they're competing for, a job space. So we see that on our side too. Like Eric, I can tell when things are going well and when things are not going well because our staff will pick up overtime. And then we'll see that fall out where they're due to burnout or just because maybe they're fighting some internal struggle with management or the way things are going. I'll see my overtime dump too on the staff side. I think that's for all environments.
Yep, that makes sense. Like at first they might be excited to pick it up and make the extra money, but then as it endures, it just becomes too much. And then they're like, no, thank you. I'll just work my regular schedule.
Well, and
Yep,
then when that happens too, I'll see like my nurse supervisors will step in once the staff burns out. My supervisors will pick up shifts, and then they start to burn out too. So it does become a cascading effect that by the time I think sometimes regionals get in to intervene, then you get burnt out leadership too, which is they're not spending time recruiting because they're covering shifts on the floor.
yeah. And I think it's really important that we pay attention to that. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about burnout within the healthcare industry over the last several years. And, it's so important to keep your people happy and good, but also, maintaining the flow of your business as well. Scott, anything that you wanted to add to that?
A little different than Jenny and Eric because we run so thin in centers. So the overtime is not a predictive analytic I can use necessarily. In fact, it goes the other way. When we have these shortages on the clinical level, what that means is we're not booking those patients, as we said. So we have hourly staff. We have MAs and intake coordinators that are making $19, $20 an hour. But if we're not booking patients enough for them to do, they're cutting them. So they're losing valued hours and not necessarily overtime, but not getting a full 8 hours a day. And so what happens then is you have, I think Eric had mentioned, you now have a staff that's showing up to work when they need to be, but they're looking for other positions. They're looking somewhere that they can be 40 plus hours. With that then gets us into that vicious cycle. Right? So now not only am I looking for that high level clinician, now I'm also looking to replace MAs, intake coordinators, surgical schedulers, and things with a little higher turnover. And in our markets where it gets out quickly, especially in the OBL and ASC world, what's going on. So that, yeah, that gets you into a vicious circle. That's tough to fight your way out of.
Yeah, definitely. So with all of these challenges that we have, both patient and staff side, what are some strategies, or what is one strategy that you'd recommend to organizations seeing the same challenges? Jenny, I'll start with you.
And Rachel, you can attest to this. So I have the different background where I've been on the agency side as the account manager, recruitment manager, staffing manager, and seeing how that all happens. Then I came over to the vendor side, company side, and I saw a whole different challenge in my workspace. And part of that was just as my role on the as the customer, I feel it's very important for me to educate those that are going to be taking care of my staffing for my facilities. So making sure I communicate with them the good, the bad, the ugly, so that they can represent that back to the recruits that they're bringing on board, in hopes of making sure that we get someone from point A to point B. I hope that I paint the picture that it's going to be tough and it's going to be difficult, but once the agency nurse arrives to the unit, if they've been given that information, they think to themselves, oh, this is not as bad as I thought it was going to be. So then we're the heroes of that. The agency is the hero, that they've made a right placement on what they're going to do. Just ensuring that our vendors know that know me and UTMB as the client, and what all that's going to entail, because they are on the nursing side in a correctional environment. Nurses go into this, physicians, whomever it may be that we're recruiting, they all go into this job category because they have this fire, passion to take care of people inside them. And that's exactly what we want to do on the correctional side. But there is a fine line of taking care of the patient and maybe fraternizing with the patient on our side. So making sure that we educate everybody on how that's going to look, how that's going to play out, is also something that we need to share and be open with, so that those clinicians going in the door understand what they're going to have to perform, with the level they're going to have to perform at, to take care of that. And I think that when we educate people, they're more successful.
So what I'm hearing is that you set your firm expectations. You have a very strong process and onboarding process, and very strong training as well. So that hopefully when people come on site or when they're hired in, there are hopefully no surprises.
Yes. And that's to hope that they don't get on the unit and last, a half a shift and leave for lunch and never come back. I think in some of our prior discussions, we've all mentioned that. So that's not our goal for anyone.
No, certainly not. Certainly not. Eric, what are some strategies, or what is one strategy that you would recommend to organizations facing the same challenges that you or someone on this team has had?
So one thing that we do is, and I know other organizations do this as well, we have specific people per shift that are designated as trainers, and we actually open it up for, it's not just one person, we will do multiple people that can be a designated trainer. But what we'll do is, and I know a lot of other organizations have done this too, where we'll bonus the trainer for training that person on their shift. And part of it's because it's extra work. And so, I mean, if you're especially in a situation where you're a employee who's picking up extra shifts because we're short-staffed, that's more than likely the person is also going to be doing the training. And so what we found was those people are fairly burnt out. And so we really try to educate them, like, hey, like, it's super important that you do a great job with this training, because this is going to lead to a reduced burden on you in terms of the overtime. But then in some cases, we saw people that, like, said, hey, I love the overtime. I'm like, short term, they love that overtime. So there wasn't a huge incentive for them to do a good job. So we would do a small bonus for the week that they were training the person, and then we would actually do additional bonuses on day 60, on day 90 for them if the person was still there. So they were incentivized. Now they weren't doing ongoing training for those 90 days, but I also incentivized, like if I was the trainer, be like, hey Jenny, how you doing today? Like Jenny's got that crazy look in her eyes where she's gonna leave at lunch and never come back. I was financially incentivized to be a friend on a shift. And we did find that decreased our turnover pretty sizably. And then also in the situations where we would track if Jenny was doing the training, what percentage of her people made it the full 90 days because I mean, accounting's tracking those bonuses. So we had a really pinpointed idea of like who's actually a good trainer, who should we change out? Because when I send them to Scott just eats his young and throws them out. They only make it 2 shifts. So you figure out who's the person with, and sometimes also you'd have to look at that my best staff member on the ground wasn't my best trainer and vice versa. So getting smarter with that was important.
Yeah, so it sounds like you kind of identify trainers, potentially emerging leaders, because those are the people that you probably want to promote up, and you incentivize with money. I think we healthcare providers like to get paid, but I think we forget that they really are money motivated, and that can make a big difference in feeling appreciated and supported for the extra work they put in.
And I will say after after we did one of these pre-call for this call, Jenny said something where I went back to my organization. Now we're doing this for agency people as well. It's a reduced number, but when the agency person comes on to help fill a shift, we're onboarding them with a trainee a person, and then if they make it the duration of their contract, they get a bonus too. Because I thought that person who's traveling in from somewhere out through the country probably needs more of a friendly face than anybody before. So.
Definitely mentorship and
Yeah.
incentivizing your core staff for sure. Scott, anything for you?
Yeah, you could have been on our internal team meeting now. I mean, that one hits us square in the face. We're looking at some options now. One of the things that we are increasing is our locums and our PRN presence because we run thinner. So we looked at the idea that Eric just talked about, which is brilliant. I've seen it work other places and it's fantastic. But in most of our centers, we will have one RN, one rad tech, one surgical scheduler, one MA. So we really struggle with who would be that team lead and who could take that time to do that because we run so thin with our staffing. So one of the things that we're looking at now is twofold. One, everyone that's in a position that would like to increase where they are or move to the next position, we're inserting training programs. It means after hours, it means we've even got some self-paced classes and things, but it's a way for you to move up as opposed to incentivizing you with just straight cash. We're looking at incentivizing you with the ability to move you up and replace you with a hire. And then the other, like I said, is we're really looking at the frequency of a bench strength, if you will, and that's where we need agencies to help us out. So that question hits us hard. That's exactly what we're dealing with every day.
Definitely. So I think from all three of you, I did hear from this, let me know if I'm wrong. It's a lot of not just financial incentive, but also the professional growth incentive as well. And I think that matters. People will stay if they feel like they're cared for. And it works. Okay, so moving on to outside of internal strategies. So us pesky agencies, when you have staffing gaps and you do need agency support, how do you choose who you want to work with? There are so many of us in the marketplace. You have your many choices. So what matters to you? And Scott, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think there needs to be, and I worked both sides of this. Before I came over to the dark side, I was a Morgan methodology trainer, Pete Lefkowitz trained. I worked a desk for years and years, and I had the good fortune to have some great recruiting managers that talked about the communication and the personal aspect of things. And so that's what I expect now as a hiring manager and somebody who brings on agencies. So the heart of your question is, if I'll make it a simple phrase I use is, if you can interchange my name with Jenny's name or Eric's name or Rachel's name and send out the same thing to me, telling me why I should use you as an agency or why you can help or what you have for me before we've spoken, before you've let me know that you know what my company is doing and what's our pain, where are our wounds, no pun intended, what is it that's hurting me? So I get probably this morning, what it's on the East Coast, it's 11 o'clock. I've got 3 emails already while we were sitting here from agencies saying, I saw your posting. We have exactly what you need. And in one of them, my name was in different font. So I'm gonna guess that the recruiter might have sent that to some other folks. Get an understanding of who you're calling on. Don't call me and solve a problem that you don't know about. I would rather you call me and ask me 10 questions and try to understand if you can be a partner with us. And so that's I think that's how I get to the heart of that manager because I was that matter because I was on both sides of that phone call before.
Be curious and care about the clients that you're interested in working with.
Do your homework. Yeah, don't cold call me out of nowhere and say, do I need a doctor? That's not going to work.
I wish you had your generic emails to share in the chat, but we won't call
Yeah, I
any of
won't
those
embarrass
agencies
anybody.
out.
They
We
all
won't.
look very similar and we've all
Yeah.
seen them. Hopefully the folks listening here, if you are sending them, stop sending them. Stop, please.
Thank you, Scott. Eric, what about you? When you have staffing gaps and need agency support, how do you choose who you partner with?
Well, one thing that Scott just reminded me, because I got a couple of those emails this morning too, so he's completely right on that. I had somebody that sent me an email a year ago who said, hey, I see that you've got buildings in Connecticut. I'm not sure if you just saw they changed the regulations for infection control nurses. I would love to have a conversation with you and let you know how those regulations could impact you. And I thought, I didn't see that. I mean, so there's a regulatory change. They flagged it. I'm sure they looked at buildings that had that. And he said, hey, I'd love to be a resource and let you know what you probably missed for homework. And so that got my attention. So it was specific to potentially a knowledge gap. But I would agree. I think that it's you want that concierge service of if I've got a problem, because if the problem's getting to where I need to bring agency in, you have typically had somebody turn over that was fairly dramatically quick. I was not able to backfill it myself. Typically a few layers of things that you would go to first have broken down. And so it's usually a fairly, I wouldn't say a panicked time, but it's a period of high stress where we've been trying to figure out how to usually get our schedule for this weekend and next weekend and all that stuff put together. A lot of times these things happen on a Friday afternoon. And so I think somebody can create, if you get those points, have that personal connection where, I'm calling just for ideal hire, not just like some 3-letter staffing agency that I don't know who they really are. And I've had some people who they said, hey, because we work in a high turnover industry, we're going to generic emails. And see.
You, Brian, about that, but it said brand
Ah.
recognition. Is that a factor in who you choose? I think what that person meant was, uh, accounts on call, Manpower, Robert Half, who are the giant versus, hi, Scott calling you Eric. I'm from the Scott agency.
I think I think especially after you use them for a little bit, then brand awareness becomes a thing where I know like certain agencies, and the sad thing is like if you talk about broken trust, like, oh, I got somebody from this agency, it was a disaster. And so very quickly it could be I'm not gonna go. So like the brand awareness almost becomes a little bit of your reputation in the market. Oh, like this company usually, and sometimes I also recognize that's very random because you guys can't control the outcomes of everybody that comes into the building. Um, there is I mean, some of the I know I had like somebody that dropped off a big stack of post-it notes that just sat at my desk for, 2 years. And so whenever I needed a staffing agency, that was the best piece of collateral ever because their phone number was at the very bottom, followed by the name of the company. And I mean, it was like, geez, I had it for 3 years. And so whenever I needed somebody, like it was right there. So that was somebody that without that personalized touch, like the convenience of having that number at my fingertips was helpful.
Same.
There you
I
go.
was about to say, Jenny, you have a prop for us, anything that you want to add to add to in regards to the agencies you choose to work with. You have a large workforce to support, so you need a lot of people.
Yeah, that was my Post-it note that has the agency's name at the bottom. That's a little scrub top with a stethoscope around its neck. It's kind of cute. No, we talked about this the other day. The concierge service is 100% what my go-to, because I staff 83 locations throughout the state of Texas. Some of them are 12-hour facilities, but most of them are 24/7. So I have a large workforce, not just on the staff side, but a large agency presence, excuse me, just to cover whatever vacancies we may have, even just covering vacations, because in a correctional environment, I can't just call up the vendor and say, send me an RN. They have to be, vetted through our compliance process. So ours is a little bit different, but understanding the true meaning of a partnership, because every agency, those 3 emails you got today, Scott, I'm sure say, I want to partner with you. I can be your partner. I understand that. But I don't know that everybody understands what that definition truly means. At least to me, I need someone that is going to be honest, even when those conversations are hard. If you have a nurse that's canceling on us, I want to understand why. And if it's an issue that's due to the environment, or maybe it's a security issue or whatever that may be. If they're sick, I need to kind of understand what that means, because all my people are residents. So they are in a very tight, confined space. We have offenders that are 4 bunks in a little bitty 6x6 room. So if your clinician has something, I need to understand that. I work with some agencies that are very transparent with me and tell me, and sometimes they're difficult conversations on both sides. And then I have others that is fluff. I don't have time for fluff. I don't have time to try to weigh through the pros, the cons, what it is. So having someone that's a true partner, that has the resources available to them, whether they are a large agency or a small agency, to have that dedicated person to me, because if they have a lot of turnover inside their own agency, I don't have the bandwidth to onboard and train someone of what my facility needs, wants, are day in and day out. So making sure this, going back to the brand awareness, yes. I mean, even though our market is, in my opinion, saturated with staffing agencies now, healthcare staffing agencies, even agencies that before were 100% IT, have seen that there's money to be made in healthcare, so they're branching out to that. But it's inundated with agencies, but it is kind of a small world. I mean, we all know when executives leave one agency and go to the other, and when they pull that team with them where they're going, we all know that it's a small world, and how you handle our situation, our account, will definitely be a factor for me on if, I don't care if you go to the #1 agency in the country. My experience with you may deter me from working with that company going forward on that side. So I definitely need someone that's interested, because some account managers are just not interested, and that's okay. Some of them are looking for the lowest hanging fruit, and that's okay. But if that is what your company desire is, then that's not going to work within our scope of practice that we have.
I think one thing I just add to that is, I think that the relationships that I've had the longest term are also the ones that know how to read the room when our communication's going out. And so, I was thinking, Jenny, like, if somebody doesn't show up and you send that message, be like, hey, like, your person's not here. If I get a fluff email back, I mean, like, a lot of times, like, that point, it's usually like a shift change, usually on a weekend. I'm like, man, I want bullet points. And I, like, to some degree, understanding the communication cadence of the person you're talking to. When things go bad, I think that's where it's really important. Sometimes, like, the initial conversation is not going to go well, but then coming back and having that follow-up conversation is helpful too, because once it goes wrong, it is a really hard thing to get back, get that trust back and that relationship back. And even having it where and taking the ownership too of, hey, like we have this person. I also love it. I mean, I know it's probably a very standard practice, but they say, yeah, this person won't be bad. I mean, even if this person, like I wouldn't actually know the truth if the person ends up working down the street for the same agency. But I like when they say, yep, like we feel your pain, like that empathy is important, that empathetic voice, because usually we're talking to them during periods of distress, professionally.
Mhm.
Definitely. So consistent communication, reliability, stability. Your account manager is really your lifeline, and you want to be able to be candid with that person on the phone and be able to trust them to tell you the truth.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Even when that's hard, even when that's difficult, or even when, I mean, there's been plenty of occasions where I've been like, okay, I need to sleep on that. Let me sleep on the conversation before I make a decision on, are we going to allow the clinician to return to work? Are we
Yeah.
not? Like, let me sleep on it because, you've given me the full picture. Because if I'm making a decision on maybe a disciplinary or something, and I only have pieces of the information that you want me to have because you think that's going to help me make the best decision, I may make an emotional decision based upon the information that I have before me. And is that always right? No, it's not. I'm human too. But I'm caught in the middle, right? I have my staff and my facilities that I'm taking care of. And then I also have my agencies that I want to take care of too, because I've been in that chair. I know it's a dog eat dog world. I want to make sure that I'm giving my vendors enough information to be able to say, yes, this is the type of concierge service that I can provide to you, or it's not. And that's great. I mean, we are not the business for everybody, even though with our high numbers and what we spend, everybody thinks they want to be my vendor, however, when they really understand what our business is, it's not always the best fit, and that's okay.
Thank you, Jenny. Follow-up question to this, and you've kind of touched on it, but can you share an example of how staffing agencies have supported your initiative specifically? I wanted to touch on you again because you have such a large workforce with your 82 facilities. How can they better collaborate with you? Or has there been a time where an agency has helped you in some way to save time and resources?
Yes. So my number one thing is that I need to work with an agency that has the same professional expectations as UTMB does. And what we hold our staff accountable to, we're going to mirror that on the flip side, on the agency side. So making sure they're getting to work on time, making sure they're when they've had 3 family emergencies in a month, when is that agency going to step in and say, I'm going to manage my employee? Because they are their employees, right? They're not my employees. They are the agency employees. So making sure that I partner with someone that holds the company holds those same expectations, because not everybody does. Some of them are like, hey, if the nurse gets to work, great, you got an extra pair of hands because your need was a critical need. So if they get there 3 hours later, at least they showed up. Yes, to an extent, but no, when that 3 hours of workload has now been pushed off, or we're not even able to fulfill that. So making sure that they have that communication is I don't think you can overly communicate. I think that is top need. So having someone that understands that is perfect. I have one vendor that I'm currently working with that the manager is really good about calling me. She calls me probably every 2 to 3 days, and she's like, hey, where are we on these open positions? How did that candidate work out for you? I'm now screening them, not just leaving it up to my recruiters. I'm now screening them, and I want to make sure that I'm hitting all the marks. That was appreciated because that shows me she's interested. She's not just after the dollar. You know, she really wants to do a good job for us and make sure that we're taken care of. And that holds a lot of weight for me.
I think that's a really great point, Jenny. Like us as agency suppliers, how we can do better is, I mean, obviously, we want to care about the business, but really truly care about it and care about your client partners that you're working with. Before we get into questions, I just want to give everybody the floor to close with one piece of advice or best practice that has positively influenced staffing efforts and or retention in your organization, whether that be using outside sources or internal initiatives. Jenny, I know you just finished, so I'll start with Eric.
I know I talked about our arrival rate or for people that showed up to interviews. One of the things that we did for that was like an inside trick. We started doing back in COVID. One of the things that became in vogue was sending little videos, and there's different providers that will that you can use that will send out digital messages. But we started sending out videos to all of our staff members. We automated it through our recruiting software. So the night before you got an interview, you would get this video saying, super excited to see you for your interview tomorrow. We'd actually walk them through the parking lot. We'd walk them to the front door. We show them who the concierge was, and we walk them through visually the first steps of the interview journey, which seems really unnecessary to me. But like what I did find was for our staff, it made a profound impact of who actually showed up to the building. And so we did do some surveys after the fact and asked if they enjoyed it or what was their kind of what like their feel was. And the feedback we got was it made the interview process a lot less intimidating. And so the idea of, I guess, some of these people waking up in the morning deciding whether or not they're going to make a trip to or not do this interview, seeing it made it less of a scary situation, but also you put a face to the person that you would potentially be standing up, which I think also had an impact. So I mean, it changed a little bit market to market, and RNs have always traditionally showed up better than our CNAs for interviews. But in some markets, we had like a 35% increase just off the bat. So we went from like 15%. And the best case test case went up to 45%. So, I mean, it was a dramatic change that was easy and repeatable.
I love that. That's brilliant. Definitely. Scott.
I think for us, the biggest change has been that we centralized the recruiting efforts. If I was a recruiter working for our company in years past, I would have fired us. I mean, we drove recruiters crazy. Some of them that I talked to when I came on, I'm shocked. I said to him, I can't believe you're still here, but I appreciate it. We would have the ops folks and the hiring managers out in the field talking with our partners, with our agencies, and then corporate would try to step in, and there were billing errors. There were folks who I thought such and such was interviewing here and going there, and the recruiters were frustrated as they should have been. And again, I get it. So one of the things that we said was, we like to talk about hiring managers. We talk about one neck to choke. We always say like, I need to have that communication. Well, I said that to them. I'm your one neck to choke. So all recruiting efforts will start from me. If I funnel you out, then I'll do that. But we'll all be on the same page. We're all singing from the same sheet of music. So if you are an agency, if you're a recruiter working with us, you now know you don't have to send 3 different bios. You don't have to send this to me and then everybody else. It just has to start with me. And that increased our time to market, if you will. And in the last 2 months, we went from getting one vascular physician into an interview process, and we've had 6 in an interview process in the last 60 days. And so I think that that's the one biggest thing that we've done is centralize, and that helps us internally because we can then track it. And if I can't measure it, I can't manage it. I know, old cliche, but it's true. And it also helps our recruiting partners because they know who to talk to now. They don't get sent all over the place and frustrated.
So one point of contact, Scott.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Jenny, I know you love that school of thought as well. So I will go ahead and let you close it on best piece of advice or best practice that has positively influenced staffing efforts.
Yeah, and I will say, Scott, just hearing you talk about that, I mean, our one point of contact was 2005. That's when we kind of incorporated that when I was on the agency side. And just hearing you speak to that though, I mean, that's exactly why we do what we do. I mean, I have 83 sites. If agencies are calling all my nurse managers at all of my 83 sites, wrong information, wrong details, all of that, plus my nurse managers are managing. I mean, they got their own wheelhouse that they're trying to take care of. So great point. I never thought about that full circle until just hearing you say that. So that's definitely ours too. I actually have kind of, we just started this. So I am on a unit at least every 90 days, at least once every 90 days, I go and I walk a unit. I think that's important in my role to understand what I am asking of the agencies and what they're asking of their employees. So I think that's important. But what we have started doing is, especially my heavy hitters, we have started inviting them to come and go on tours to a unit, because what you see about corrections on TV may be right, but there's a lot of stuff that's not. But going behind that first gate that closes behind you, it's scary. It's a really scary thought and feeling. So we've started inviting our agency partners to go on tours to some of our bigger units that have the full gamut of services provided, so they can walk the unit and kind of see what it's going to be like, so they can take it back there to their team and give it downline to help make that start a little bit better. So I think that's something that we will continue and hopefully get everybody through the process where they can go and see a big unit, so that everything is out there in full transparency, and they can give that real connection to the person that they're speaking to on the other the phone.
Definitely. Thank you, Jenny. Before we move into questions, Scott and Eric, anything that you wanted to add?
No, I mean, I think that the one thing I would just say is, I keep going back to Scott's emails. He said, we want to partner with you. And I think that's really true. I think the best relationships are when you can partner. I don't think that like throwing it out like that's the end. Like, hey, I want to. It's like you don't find your wife by saying, hey, I'm looking to get married on the first. It's like you've got to build trust and build a relationship. And I think that there's different ways to do it, but I do agree that single point of contact, even for Jenny, like for 82 buildings, there's no way one person's managing all the staffings, but like I'm your person, I'll hand it off to other people to make it happen. I think it really does make a difference. And I would say also from a staffing perspective, when I've had my person leave the agency, I've more than often, and if they go somewhere else, I'll follow that person.
Yeah.
So that I think that from a staffing agency perspective, that might just be one piece to keep an eye on. And one of the things I've seen as I don't know if this is probably a direct relationship to that, but I've had like my person's supervisor reach out every 90 days, be like, hey, so I make sure that you're happy with everything. And so having a little bit of a greater organizational relationship is beneficial too, to, I guess, the original question of brand awareness.
Yeah, no, definitely. The relationship matters. I mean, that's been kind of the biggest thing that I've heard from the three of you today, outside of the financial aspect, whether it be within your internal or external teams that you work with. And I agree. All right, we have about 6 minutes. We did get some questions in the chat, so I'm going to try to get through as many as we can. First one was just going back and touching on some of the numbers that we saw earlier. The question was, and any of you guys can answer, do you think supply demand is a big struggle, meaning because there are so many openings that the candidate might have too many options and therefore the commitment isn't solid?
I think, yes. I also think that during the pandemic, employees really found what their value was to an organization when the shortages were so profound. I think that did change the dynamic a little bit, where they know that they hold power in the relationship that they maybe didn't realize before.
Anything from you or Scott or Jenny?
No, I agree with Eric. I mean, the pandemic changed everything. So, hey, look, if you're a highly doubted draft pick and everyone's coming after you. I mean, that's what nurses are right now. I mean, right after the pandemic, they were riding the bonus train, right? We had so many
Yep.
nurses that are like, yeah, I'll give you 6 months, but let's face it, once I give that and you give me my bonus, I'm going to go to the next place. That's okay, good for you. This is your time, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just means that your interview process during the sourcing that you've really got to dial it in. You know, what are you going to leave me for $10,000 in 6 months? Is that okay with me? Or am I looking for something different? So I think, yes, the supply and demand affects it, and you can sit and whine about it. Oh, this isn't right. I guess not, but you've got to come up with being okay with it or how you work your business around it. What do they say? Adapt or die. And that's for all of our industries.
Mhm.
Adapt or die. I love that. Okay, next question. So seeing the issue at hand as far as compliance forms and attendance commitment, as an agency or any agency, how can we help to streamline that process and ensure more commitment from candidates? What would you guys like to see from people like us?
So I can speak to that. I have a couple of agencies that have went as far to, you know, kind of putting a checklist together and having the clinicians sign off on it. I think it's part of protection on their side as well. So when they're not, and when they have 3 family emergencies in a month period of time that they're missing multiple shifts for, they can go back and say, hey, the attendance is important. You signed off that you were aware of this. And so this may be coaching or maybe even a disciplinary over on their side. I think that also protects them in any unemployment claims that they may have, because if they get terminated due to that, then that's just another piece in their arsenal to say, well, yes, but this is what they went against, you know, the community standards, for a lack of better words, and they didn't follow through. So it protects the agency vendors on that side. I've seen that be very helpful.
Yeah, it reinforces the trust between you and your partner because you're like, at least I know they talked to them about it. That's the best that we can do once, you know, people are
We're the
humans,
people
things
business.
happen.
Yeah,
Exactly.
You can't change that.
Definitely. No. Next one. Could you share an example of where a healthcare facility successfully filled critical roles faster and what strategies worked best? So I don't know, Scott, I know you kind of touched on that with some of your initiatives. Do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I mean, I can give you multiple. Over the summer, we had a physician who died suddenly. So you heard the stats that I gave you about these surgeons. I mean, this was in a rural area. So you're talking about, if you look at AMN's it, stats, you're talking about 344 days to fill on average. I was able to call one of my agency partners, get a vascular surgeon up that was going to be a locum, sort of part-time. They had that dialed in 3 weeks, which, uh, I mean, we may have had to shut down that center if it was up to me, and I would have had to go and search for that and spend, let's say I cut it in half, did 150 days, we would have lost patients to other centers, to the hospital, all over the place. So that's a common theme for us, also getting RNs in very quickly. So I use that as a stopgap measure. While I may be doing the personal search, or my team might be doing the personnel search, the perm search, but I need my partners to be able to jump on something and get that in there. So they've saved my bacon numerous times over the years.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. Well, guys, we are at time. So I want to thank all 3 of you for joining us. For our audience members and participants, there were a lot more questions that we did not have time to get to, so may pass those over to you if you have time to reach out. We can cascade that information out. But Jenny, Scott, Eric, and the rest of the team watching, thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you on the next one.
Thank
Thank
you.
Thank you.